Hello and welcome once again to another episode of r/ProRevenge. My name's Ryan, the official host here at Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do though, I'd just really appreciate it if you could hit that subscriber button and that notification bell to stay up to date on all the latest videos. And for those of you who've done it already, thank you very much. Killed a tow company with one simple phone call. On mobile, so bear with me. Several years back, I went to work for a towing company. It's about all I know how to do other than paint cars, which is drastically affecting my health. The pay was pretty decent, but we had to share trucks and the boss felt like he knew where we needed to sit in order to get the best calls. This is important for later. Several months in, I realized that I wasn't making the type of money that I should be making. So I took the opportunity while I was sitting in a parking lot one evening to start researching the laws pertaining to employees in similar situations. He was kind of awesome, and the trucks had transponders so that he could see if we had them idling with the air conditioner on and on a hot day or idling with the heat on a cold day. He was always calling, complaining about something if the wheels were not turning. During my research, I discovered that if he was requiring us to sit in a certain parking lot, street, or any location of his choosing, then we were entitled to be paid an hourly wage, not just our commission. The technical term was engaged to wait. However, if he allowed us to freely roam about while we waited for calls, we weren't entitled to hourly wages, and we would therefore be considered waiting to be engaged. I never mentioned this to him, but I did start taking note of my time. Another month or so goes by, and he decided to start coming down on me for tiny little BS. Things that ordinarily wouldn't even matter, such as I forgot a pop can in the cup holder. He actually had a screaming fit about that. At this point, I was tired of working there and had already found another job, so I decided it was time to put my plan into motion. I called him up, told him that we needed to have a conversation about my final wages and that we could meet at his convenience. Upon entering the office, I laid out my argument, explained the state law, and told him I expected to be paid for the hours that I was on the clock for, but not freely allowed to roam looking for work or able to do things of my choosing. He told me in no uncertain terms would I be paid for that extra time, as that was what we agreed upon my employment. I didn't bother to argue as I already had my next step planned, so I took my final check and I left. The following Monday, I made a phone call to the State Labor Board where I laid out my case to them, and needless to say, they were very interested in what was going on. In the end, they came to review his employment records and speak to the driver still working. When he got the bill of what he had to pay us all, it was too much for him to afford, so he sold the trucks, his boat, and a lot went out of business. I'll never get the money owed to me in full, only a fraction. But the satisfaction of knowing the law is just a little bit better than what he did, and watching it all burn was pure bliss. dldr, boss fucks us on legally entitled wages, and I sink his company with one phone call. A coworker was eating people's lunches, so I poisoned them and got him fired. So I like to bring my own food into the office, and we have a fridge to put things into, and I have my food in tubs with my name on them. A coworker would sometimes not see people's names on food and think it was theirs, so would heat it up and eat it and apologize. They did this enough for it to be an annoyance, but not enough for our employers to really care. This has been happening with my food for once or twice a month. Last month, I had enough, and I like spicy food, but don't bring it into the office, as sometimes I'll let people try some of my food in my cooking. I ordered a bag of ghost chili peppers and put the full bag into a big pot of chili that would last for several days. I took this into the office and had it for lunch every day. Midweek, my lunch went missing, and I was waiting for the person who was stealing my lunch to get a shock when they ate it. What happened in reality was someone got sent home sick. And the next day, they were off, and I was told they went to the doctors for stomach pains. 2 weeks went by, and the coworker who was off refused to talk about it and said HR was involved, so I knew they were going to try and get me fired. I went home and ordered another bag of ghost chilies and made another batch of my chili, this time with only one chili in a single tub. I put this in the freezer, and the following Monday I was told I had an HR meeting that day. I refused and said they need to give me 24 hours to find someone to come into the meeting with me, and the next day, I had my manager come into the meeting and brought my, now heated, ghost chili infused chili. The long and short was I was told I could be fired for trying to poison the person who was stealing my lunch, and I asked if they admitted to stealing people's lunch, which they did. I then said I have a batch of the chili in question with me, and I like spicy food. My liking spicy food shouldn't stop me from having it at work, since it doesn't smell when heated like fish, and my manager agreed it was on the person who took my lunch without knowing how spicy it was, and I shouldn't be held liable if they eat something of someone else's that doesn't agree with them. My manager and I then ate some of the chili and offered it to the other people in the meeting, some of which tried it and agreed that while it was spicy, it was clearly what I liked, as I was fine eating it. The meeting ended and nothing happened. I wasn't taken into another meeting and my lunch wasn't taken anymore, but the person who had stole our lunch got a slap on the wrist and was allowed to stay at work. Lunches started to go missing again, so my manager went to HR to say that lunches were going missing, and he knew who the person was taking it and had proof this time, and when they asked for the proof, he presented the meeting record with line highlighted where they admitted they had stolen lunch and the line where HR had said this was not what the meeting was about. They were fired the next day for theft of property and told they wouldn't be given a reference. TLDR, a coworker was eating people's lunches, so I poisoned them and got them fired. The story on how I got promoted to Director of Sales and Sales Recruitment. I've been with my current employer for many years now. Even though I've quit, I've come back to them. My company also has an incentive, and if an employee comes up with a new way to do business better or changes something that has a net benefit to the company, they get a percentage of the increased revenue/profit. Over the years with this company, I have had several major impacts. Well, about a year ago, I was talking to a senior level manager. Let's call him Bob. And Bob was telling me about how the company has been having an issue in recruitment and hiring of new talent for our sales division. Now, I'd been in sales before and knew of the pitfalls of our structure created and why senior reps would excel and junior reps would get crushed if they had a really good idea on our turnover challenges. Then one night I had an idea on how to change the sales structure for our company, almost entirely, which would still retain our senior reps but also make it easier for younger, more junior reps to find success and stability by a result of reducing turnover. I spent a good amount of time designing this plan before I ever presented it to anyone, since this was Bob's area of expertise. After many revisions and bouncing it around my head, I called Bob and presented my idea to Bob. Bob liked it a lot. However, he had a few minor tweaks, and he brought up concerns company executives would have. I tweaked the plan and came up with rebuttals to those objections and shared my plan with Bob. I did this several times. I would say that my plans stayed about 90% original. Bob had been with our company for decades at this point, and I've known him for my entire time there, so I trusted Bob would be sure to credit me. Considering my name was all over my presentation I sent over to Bob, I expected Bob to share the love with me if there should be any. I felt like I needed Bob as an ally to make my idea work, which is why I brought him into my plan. New drinking game if you guys want to die watching at home. Take a drink every time this guy says Bob. I followed up with Bob, and he basically made it seem like my idea was rejected, that the company was going to keep on doing what it's always done. Okay, fine, whatever, this kind of thing happens. It's not the first time my idea's been rejected. Cue a few months later, and our new fiscal year is starting, and our CEO calls everyone to a company-wide meeting. And as I sit down to watch, I witness our CEO praise Bob for coming up with a brilliant new sales structure strategy and compensation plan. It is my plan, with my name removed. The CEO is gushing over how wonderful the idea is and how he thinks it will benefit us greatly. I'm fuming pissed that Bob stole my work, put his name on it, and took the credit. He violated my trust and lied to me, and he told the company had rejected the idea. Yet here I am watching my company implement my idea. I get on the phone with my VP and let loose. Now my VP, let's call him Tim, is a really good guy and I trusted him. Tim is taken aback and says that right around the time I presented my plan to Bob, Bob started presenting to senior management and it was almost immediately considered a great idea. In fact, Bob knew the company was considering forcing him into retirement because they felt Bob was holding the company back and the company needed to make a change, and this idea was save Bob's job. Now, to give you an overview of how in-depth my plan was. Completely restructured compensation plan, completely changed how we presented ourselves to new potential hires, completely changed our sales training to be more focused on real-world realities, refined the sales order to process and reduce workloads in the streamline, did all that using current infrastructure. Each step included suggestions on how to implement the change, and Bob oversaw all of this in his current role. I then asked if I could prove that it was my idea, and that I had presented it to Bob, and so forth. Now Bob and I had discussed this over email, and Facebook Messenger, and another chat app. I went through our emails, Facebook Messenger, and a chat app, and took screenshots, created a PowerPoint, and made it so easy to present ideas, and sent it to my VP. 2 days later, my VP called and said I needed to go into a conference call with HR, my VP, and the CEO. In that meeting, we discussed the plan I had created, the collaboration I had done with Bob, and my plan to implement it. Not only that I presented the research that I had done, which Bob did not have access to, and justified why my idea was a good idea, the CEO seemed impressed with what I had done and convinced that I was the true creator. I was then asked what I thought had happened, and I straight up accused Bob with stealing my idea and removing my name from it in an attempt to further his career. I was told they would be having a separate meeting with Bob, and after that, they would inform me of any future changes. A week later, my VP called me and asked me if I was offered the chance to implement my plan, would I be willing to do that. This was obviously a promotion, and I said of course. 2 weeks later, I get a call from my VP telling me he's coming to my location to visit me. He also tells me I should make sure to look sharp and presentable. I tried to figure out why he was coming, but he wouldn't say. 2 days later, I come into the office, check my email now, and all big retirement resignations are announced company-wide. I see an email stating that Bob has retired. What I found strange is the retirement date was effective immediately and that his replacement will be announced shortly. Generally, there is a time period for takeover to happen, and the replacement is announced in the email along with a brief overview of their qualifications. The time for my VP to show up comes, and in walks my VP and the CEO. We go out to lunch, and the CEO says, "PJ, I came to visit you because I always think it's best to give people major promotions in the news in person. But I'd like to offer you the position of Director of Sales and Sales Recruitment and put you in charge of implementing your idea." To which I accepted naturally. This man sounds like a psychopath. Then again, that's partially my fault, if not entirely. Then I asked, "Is this why Bob retired?" To which the CEO smiled and said, "After talking to you and talking to Bob, I discussed it among senior management and decided that it was time for a change. Time to inject new blood into our organization, and Bob really wanted to start his retirement, so it was best for all of us." I smiled and said thank you. I know perfectly well Bob intended on working until the day he died. And with that, my friends, we've reached the end of today's ProRevenge. If you liked it, you know what to do. Leave a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with the latest and the greatest here on Reddit Voice. Speaking of Reddit Voice, if you haven't heard of me, my name's Ryan, the official narrator here, and I look forward to seeing each and every one of you guys in the next video.